Here's something strange. You've cried about this person more times than you can count. You've vented to your friends, who, by the way, have been patient saints. You've made the pros and cons list. You've even Googled, how do I know if a relationship is toxic at 2 in the morning? And somehow, you're still there. Still texting back, still making excuses, still choosing someone who, if you're being brutally honest, doesn't choose you. And the wildest part? You know it. You know exactly what's happening, but knowing doesn't make leaving any easier. If anything, knowing makes it more confusing because now you feel stuck and foolish. So why does walking away from someone who hurts you feel harder than staying? Why does the brain, this magnificent, complex organ that can solve math problems and parallel park and remember every embarrassing thing you said in 2009, completely short-circuit when it comes to this one thing? There's actually a deeply fascinating psychology behind it, and once you understand it, you'll never look at yourself or anyone else going through this the same way again. The intermittent reinforcement trap. Picture this. You're at a slot machine. You pull the lever, nothing. Pull again, nothing. Pull again, and suddenly lights flash, coins pour out, and your brain lights up like a Christmas tree. Now imagine someone treating you the same way. Cold for a week, then suddenly warm and wonderful. Critical and distant, then loving and attentive. Your nervous system doesn't experience that as chaos, it experiences it as excitement, as hope. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, and it is arguably one of the most powerful behavioral hooks in existence. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. When kindness, affection, or approval comes unpredictably, sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't, your brain becomes obsessed with earning it. You don't bond most strongly to people who are consistently good to you. You bond most strongly to people who are sometimes good to you. The unpredictability itself becomes the drug. So when you think about leaving, your brain doesn't flash images of the arguments or the cooled silences. It flashes the good days, the moments that felt like winning. And it whispers, what if the good version comes back? Maybe it's you who's been in this trap. Maybe someone you love. Then there's a different kind of stock, and this one is quieter, more rational sounding, which makes it even sneakier. You've been in this relationship for years. You've built a life, shared memories, maybe a home, maybe a dog, definitely a Netflix password. And somewhere in your mind, a very logical sounding voice says, I can't leave now. I've put too much into this. Economists call this the sunk cost fallacy, the tendency to keep investing in something because of what you've already spent, rather than what you're likely to gain. Investors do it with failing stocks. Moviegoers do it with terrible films they refuse to walk out of, and people do it with relationships that are slowly draining them. The heart keeps its own ledger. If I stay a little longer, maybe it'll balance out. Maybe I'll get a return on all this pain. But here's the thing about sunk costs. They're already gone. The years, the effort, the love you gave, you don't get those back by staying. And yet, the brain, bless it, keeps trying to negotiate. The identity knot. But here's the twist. For some people, it's not about the other person at all. Not really. It's about who they become when they're in that relationship. Maybe they're the fixer, the one who holds everything together, the strong one, the patient one, the one who sees potential in people nobody else bothers with. Walk away, and suddenly, who are they? This is what psychologists sometimes call enmeshment, when your identity becomes so fused with another person's story that separating from them feels like separating from yourself. The toxic relationship, as painful as it is, has become part of your self-concept. Leaving doesn't just mean losing them, it means losing a role, a purpose, a familiar version of yourself, even if that version was exhausted and hurting. The devil you know, as they say, feels safer than the stranger you might become on the other side of goodbye. Recognize anyone in that? Maybe yourself on your most honest days. The empathy anchor. Another profile, and this one tends to show up in some of the kindest, most emotionally intelligent people out there, which is both beautiful and heartbreaking. They stay because they understand the toxic person. They've heard the backstory, they know about the childhood, the wounds, the reasons. And because they understand, they feel responsible. Leaving starts to feel less like self-preservation and more like abandonment. Here's the psychological truth that nobody tells you early enough. Understanding someone's pain does not obligate you to absorb it. Empathy is one of the most extraordinary human gifts, but without boundaries, it becomes a leash. The empathy anchor keeps compassionate people tethered to dynamics that are slowly eroding them, because every time they try to leave, they picture the other person's hurt, and they can't bear to be the cause of it, even if that person causes them hurt constantly, even if staying costs them everything. The fear of the after. And finally, the one nobody likes to admit out loud. Sometimes we don't leave because on some quiet, uncomfortable level, we're terrified of what comes after. The empty apartment, the holidays alone, starting over, the humbling, vulnerable process of rebuilding. Toxic relationships are exhausting, yes, but they're also full. There's always something happening, always a fire to put out, always intensity. And intensity, even painful intensity, can feel safer than stillness, than the unknown, than having to sit with yourself and figure out what you actually want. The brain interprets certainty, even painful certainty, as safety. And freedom, when you've been in survival mode for long enough, can feel less like relief and more like terrifying open water. So here's where that leaves you, knowing all of this. Understanding the intermittent rewards, the sunk costs, the identity loss, the empathy trap, and the fear of the after. Does it make leaving easier? Maybe not immediately, but here's what it does do. It removes the shame. You're not weak, you're not stupid, you're not broken. You're human, and your brain is doing exactly what human brains do, clinging to familiarity, chasing hope, protecting identity, and trying desperately to make meaning out of pain. The first step was never leaving. The first step was understanding why it felt impossible. And now you have that. So, which of these landed for you? Was it one, or did you recognize yourself in a few? Drop it in the comments, not because the algorithm demands it, but because naming it out loud is often the thing that makes it real. And if this gave you something to think about, stick around. There's a lot more psychology worth understanding, especially the kind that helps you understand yourself.